There is a man in a stone room, and he is going to die in the morning. He knows it, the guards know it, and the Roman official sitting across from him knows it too, which is why the official leans forward and offers him the easiest deal in the world. Just say the words. Say you never knew the man from Nazareth. Say it was all a mistake, a misunderstanding, a story that got out of hand. Say it, and you walk out of here alive. The man in chains says nothing, and in the morning, he dies. Now here is the part that should stop you cold. That scene did not happen once. With small changes, a different city, a different year, a different blade, it happened again, and again, and again, to 11 different men. These were not soldiers. They were not fanatics raised from birth to die for a cause. They were fishermen, a tax collector, a man so famous for doubting that we still use his name for it. Ordinary men with families and boats and debts who 3 years earlier had never done anything more dangerous than haul a net. And almost every one of them died badly, crucified, speared, stoned, beheaded, scattered across 3 continents, dying alone in countries whose languages they had to learn as adults. Here is the question this whole video is built on. People lie to stay alive. That is the most natural thing in the world. Any one of these men could have saved his own life with a single sentence, "I made it up." Not one of them ever did. They lied to no one. They simply would not take it back. They died to keep their word. This is not a list. This is not a history lesson. This is not a collection of gruesome ways to die. This is a question about what a person has to have seen, what they have to know in their bones, to choose death over one easy sentence. And I will tell you something now, so you watch for it the whole way through. Of the 12, there is one man the executioners never managed to kill. Not for lack of trying. They tried something horrifying, something that should have ended him on the spot. And it didn't. He outlived every other man in this story. He died old, in his own bed, of nothing but age. We will get to his name, but not yet. Because to understand the one who lived, you have to start with the first one to fall, a man who was standing close enough to Jesus to ask for a throne, and was the first of the 12 to get a grave instead. Stay with me. Before we go further, you need to know one word, because it changes how you hear everything that follows. The word is martyr. We use it today to mean someone who dies for what they believe. But that is not what it meant at the start. The original Greek word is martys, and it simply meant a witness, a person who saw something with their own eyes and tells you what they saw. Nothing about dying, nothing about blood. Just a witness in a courtroom, pointing and saying, "I was there, this happened." So how did a word that meant witness come to mean someone who is killed for their faith? It changed for one reason. So many of the witnesses to Jesus were being killed for refusing to stop talking that the word itself bent under the weight of their bodies. The language changed because of how they died. Hold on to that. These men were not, in their own minds, dying for a belief. They were dying for a fact they had seen. They were witnesses who would not lie on the stand. Now, one honest thing before the names. Only one of these deaths is actually written in the Bible. Just one. Everything else comes from church tradition and from historians who wrote decades or centuries later, men like Eusebius and Tertullian. I am going to tell you every time which is which, because a story this serious deserves to be told straight. So let us start with the one the Bible does record. His name is James, the brother of John, one of the sons of a fisherman named Zebedee. This is a man who once asked Jesus, straight to his face, if he could sit at his right hand in the kingdom. He wanted a throne. What he got, about 14 years after the resurrection, was a sword. The book of Acts tells it in a single brutal sentence. King Herod killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. That is the whole obituary. No drama, no last words recorded. The first of the 12 to fall, cut down by a king, and Scripture does not even slow down to mourn him, because by then the others already knew this was the cost. Then there is Peter. You know Peter, the one who talked too much and meant all of it, the one who swore he would never deny Jesus, and then denied him 3 times before a rooster finished crowing. If you were going to bet on one disciple cracking under pressure, you would have bet on Peter. He had already done it once. And yet, tradition, recorded through Eusebius, says Peter died in Rome under the Emperor Nero, somewhere around the year 64 to 68, crucified like his Lord. But the old account adds a detail that tells you everything about the man he became. Peter is said to have asked to be crucified upside down, head toward the earth, because he did not consider himself worthy to die in the same way as Jesus. The man who once denied even knowing him would not even die facing the same direction. Jesus had warned him this was coming years before by the Sea of Galilee, telling Peter that one day someone else would stretch out his hands and lead him where he did not want to go. Peter heard that, and he followed anyway. His brother was right beside him in this from the beginning. Andrew, Peter's brother, the one who first brought Peter to Jesus. Tradition says Andrew carried the message far north and west, and was finally crucified in Greece, in a city called Patras, not on an upright cross, but on one shaped like an X. And here is the part that has echoed down the centuries. The old accounts say Andrew did not die quickly. They say he hung on that X-shaped cross for 2 days, still alive, still breathing, and that he spent those 2 days preaching to the crowd that had gathered to watch him die. 2 brothers, 2 crosses, 1 reason. And they were only the first 3 men down, and we are not even out of the first generation yet. James cut down by a king's sword, Peter crucified upside down in Rome, Andrew preaching from an X-shaped cross for 2 days while he died. 3 different cities, 3 different ways to die. One thing in common, not a single one of them said the sentence that would have saved his life. If this is hitting you the way it hits me, do one small thing. Subscribe, so the next 9 men get told too, because the disciples are about to scatter to the edges of the known world. And if one of these 3 has already stayed with you, tell me his name in the comments. I read them. Now watch what happens next, because the 12 are about to split up, and the man famous for doubting is about to travel farther than any of them. Picture a map of the ancient world, and picture 12 men walking off in 12 different directions, each one carrying the same impossible claim, each one walking toward his own grave. Start with the one nobody would have picked, Thomas. We call him Doubting Thomas, and we say it almost like an insult, the man who refused to believe Jesus had risen until he could put his own fingers in the wounds. But watch where that doubter goes. Tradition says Thomas traveled farther than any other disciple, past the edge of the Roman world entirely, all the way to India. The man who needed proof crossed an entire ocean of unknown to tell people what he had finally seen. Tradition says he was killed there, run through with a spear near the coast of southern India. And here is something you can still check today. There is a community of Christians in India right now who trace their faith back almost 2,000 years to Thomas. The doubter planted something that outlived empires. Then there is Bartholomew, sometimes called Nathaniel. Tradition carried him north into Armenia, and his death is remembered as one of the hardest of them all. I will not dwell on the details except to say it was slow and it was cruel, and he did not recant to make it stop. He could have. The offer was always the same offer. Just take it back. He didn't. And here I have to be honest with you again. For some of these men, the trail goes cold. Matthew, the tax collector, the one who walked away from a booth full of money to follow a traveling preacher, tradition says he died a martyr somewhere in Ethiopia or Persia, but the accounts disagree. James, the son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, Thaddeus. For these men, the traditions are tangled. sometimes contradictory. One source says one thing, another says something else. I am not going to pretend to certainty I do not have. But notice the shape of every single tradition, even the uncertain ones. They never disagree about whether these men stayed faithful. They only disagree about which country, which year, which blade. The faithfulness is the one thing no version doubts. And then there is the 12th man, the one who breaks the pattern completely. Judas Iscariot. Judas also died young. Judas also died violently. But Judas did not die for anything. He died from something. From the unbearable weight of having sold the one person who had trusted him for 30 pieces of silver he then threw back onto the temple floor. The Bible says he went out and hanged himself. And that is the contrast the whole story turns on. 11 men died because of what they had seen and would not deny. One man died because of what he had done and could not undo. 11 deaths full of strange, stubborn hope. One death with no hope in it at all. That is the difference between dying for the truth and dying from a lie. But we still have one man left, the one I told you about at the very beginning, the one the executioners could not kill. It is time you knew his name. His name is John, the brother of James, the same James whose sword death opened this whole story. 2 brothers who asked for thrones. One was the first of the 12 to die. The other would be the last man standing. John outlived all of them. While his friends were being crucified and speared and beheaded across the empire, John kept going, preaching, writing, growing old in the city of Ephesus. And that alone is strange enough. But the oldest accounts say it was not for lack of trying on Rome's part. The early church writer Tertullian, writing around the year 200, passes down a tradition that the Romans tried to execute John in Rome by throwing him into a cauldron of boiling oil. It should have been instant. It should have been the end, and the account says John walked out of it unharmed. Whether you take that as miracle or legend, here is what is not in dispute. They could not make him stop. So in the end, they did the only thing left. They exiled him. They shipped an old man off to a barren prison island in the Aegean Sea called Patmos, and they left him there to be forgotten. And here is the part that should give you chills. It was on that island, that place of punishment, that the last living disciple, the one who watched every friend he had die for this, sat down and wrote the final book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. The man they could not kill became the man who wrote about the end of death itself. The only one of the 12 to die of old age is the one who left us the vision of a world where one day there would be no more dying at all. There is one more name to add, though he was never one of the original 12. Paul, the man who started out hunting Christians and ended up the most relentless one of them all. Tradition, again through the early historians, says Paul was executed in Rome under Nero, but because Paul was a Roman citizen, he was spared crucifixion and given the cleaner death of beheading. And we are not relying only on church sources here. The Roman historian Tacitus, no friend of Christianity, records that Nero savagely persecuted Christians in Rome around this time, even burning them as human torches to light his gardens. That is the world Peter and Paul died in. We have it from Rome's own historian. So now stand back and look at all of it at once. And let me give you the argument that has kept thoughtful people up at night. People will absolutely die for something they believe is true. History is full of it. But these 12 men were not in that position. They were not dying for a belief they had inherited or a cause they had been talked into. They were claiming to be eyewitnesses that they personally saw a man executed and then alive again 3 days later. If that was a lie, they were not mistaken about it. They would have known. You cannot be honestly wrong about whether you had dinner with your friend after his funeral. And that is the thing that will not go away. If they made it up, then a dozen men in different countries over decades, under torture, with one easy sentence available to any of them at any moment, All chose to die instead. Liars do that, but liars usually crack. Liars usually save themselves. Anyone who has ever tried to hold a secret under real pressure knows how fast the truth comes out when your life is on the line. 12 men had that sentence in their mouths, and not one of them ever said it. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of this. First, the honest one. Only a single one of these deaths is written in the Bible, James, killed by Herod's sword. Everything else comes from tradition and from historians writing later. That matters, and I will not pretend otherwise. But step back and look at the whole shape of it, across dozens of separate accounts, written in different centuries, in different languages, by people who never met. They argue about the country, the year, the method. They never once argue about whether these men stayed faithful to the end. When that many independent stories disagree about everything except one thing, that one thing is worth paying attention to. Second, remember the word. Martyr did not start out meaning someone who dies. It meant a witness. These men did not go looking for death. They were not chasing pain or trying to prove how brave they were. They were simply witnesses who refused to lie about what they had seen. The dying was never the point. The not lying was the point. The dying was just the price the world charged them for it. And third, the one I want you to actually take home. Every single one of them had a way out. Every one. A Roman official, a local mob, a hostile king, over and over, the offer was the same offer the very first man heard in that stone room. Just take it back. Say you never knew him. Save your own life with one sentence. And across the entire ancient world, over the span of a lifetime, with everything to gain and only the truth to lose, not one of them ever said it. Think about how loud that silence is. 12 men, one sentence that would have spared every one of them. And 2,000 years later, we are still listening to them not say it. So here is what I want to know from you. Of all these men, Peter upside down, Andrew preaching from his cross, Thomas at the edge of the world, John in the boiling oil, which death made you stop and sit with it the longest? Tell me his name in the comments. I read everyone. Because somewhere out there is a man in a stone room, the morning before he dies, being offered his life for a single sentence, and he still won't say it.